Hello to everyone. In my work, I attempt to examine the process of the at work in Holocaust commemoration and the memory forms they acquire in visits by Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and their progeny to mass murdered sites. Like in the book of the Numbers written, when you see, you shall remember and do. Seeing is the catalyst to remembrance, and the latter leads to action. The goal of this case study is to define the most important features of the memory commemoration by examining the memories held by different generations of Vilnius Jews on Panar, one of the largest mass murder sites in Lithuania. And to trace how the process of remembering took place and how it changed over different political eras. My research makes use of case files from the Soviet era religious affairs representative conserved at the Lithuanian State Central Archive, which contain early requests made by Vilnius Rabbi Chaim Shifrin to allow the holding of the organized public commemorations at Panar. My research also makes use of documents and in the collections of the Vilna Gaon State Jewish Museum from Jewish cultural associations, the Soviet Graves and Mass Shootings Commission, different memories and testimonies published after 1990s, and interviews of Vilnius Jews of different generations conducted in 2015. Efforts by the Jewish community to remember and commemorate what happened to their family members and all other members of the community during the Holocaust manifested themselves not just in attempts to protect and mark mass murder sites, but in other ways as well. One such way was holding commemorative events and assemblies at mass murder sites, something which was done with some interruptions over the entire course of post-war Soviet history. The first mass meeting, the first mass meeting of this kind took place even as the military hostilities continued inside Lithuania, following immediately upon the liberation of Vilnius from the Nazis in August 1944. A large assembly of mourners turned out at Panar for the event. Rabbi Gutman addressed the people. The cantor Eliazerovich performed Kaddish. For the dead and survivor, writer and partisan Kaczerginsky read his letter from Panar. Mikhail Sobol, born in 1929, a soldier who had served in the 16th Lithuanian Division of the Red Army, writing to the family from Vilnius on or around August 25, 1944, after the city was liberated from the Nazis, said, "I will go to Panar today. There will be a meeting there. Pits have been exhumed containing 12,000 and 10,000 people, and many recognize the corpses of their family members. Those who gathered at Panar that year were not just trying to commemorate the dead, it seems, but were also looking to find out more about their own family members, since this was exactly the time when the Special Commission for Investigating Nazi Crimes was working at Panar." Commemoration at Paneriai took place several more years in a row, with permission sought from and granted by government institutions. Vilnius Jews organized the trip to visit the graves at Panar at the end of summer. On that day, members of community drove from synagogue to Panar, where they prayed. Vilnius Rabbi Shifrin requested permission for this form the Soviet Religious Affairs representative. The last permit to hold such an assembly was issued in 1947. Commemorations that year were held at the end of summer, and whether it was a coincidence or not, I associate them with a Tisha B'Av. It falls in July or August, and it's a saddest day in the Jewish calendar. Commemoration planned at Ponar for 1948, with an official unveiling of a monument there never took place. At the same year, Stalin anti-Semitic campaign got underway, and in the years following, Vilnius Jews were forced to go to underground. Of course, commemorations and visits to Ponar didn't stop. They simply became less organized. People traveled in small groups or individually to Ponar to remember their lost family members. Žana Ranaitė Čarnienė, who came back to Vilnius in 1953 following deportation, recalls, "I used to remember my dead parents, brother, relatives, and acquaintances without a synagogue. Often I traveled alone to Ponar. The tall old pine trees, the witnesses to the terrible massacres there, rustled in the wind as if they were mourning in agony over the innocent victims." In the 1960s, visits to Ponar on May 9th began. They came individually. Sometimes there were 10 to 20, but they didn't drive there to hold a meeting. They drove, came up to the pit, placed their hand, and my father knew the prayers and said prayers to himself in his thoughts. I think that was already in 1960. When exactly, I don't know, but around 1960. And I know that because my father used to say sometimes, "I am driving to Ponar. We will mark a victory day there." Jews met there to commemorate 9th of May, Victory Day. They didn't do anything official. Everyone came, friends gathered, and that's how they marked it, and that existed over the entire period. It appears there were not only organized meetings of Jews at Ponar until the 70s. Their appearance seems to coincide with the wave of struggle for the right of Jews to leave the Soviet Union. Large-scale commemorations took place at Babi Yar in the Ukraine, Rumbula in Latvia, and Vilnius in Lithuania in 1971. A participant in the latter and later an active member of Helsinki group, Itanas Finkelsteinas, along with several friends, including Shmuel Ben Tzvi, at that time Samuel Tzizon, and Mark Moses, decided to hold a commemoration at Ponar. Shmuel Ben Tzvi recalls, "And we decided, as the so-called Tisha B'Av drew near, we decided to hold a march from Vilnius to Ponar, having the goal of reading a prayer for the dead and making a 6-pointed star out of yellow flowers. And we went. There were about 500 of us. Most were acquainted from the ensemble, and we organized all of it. We went by foot to Ponar. In Ponar, we read a prayer, laid down the 6-pointed star, large of yellow flowers, sang a few songs, and decided to return. But all together this time. As we were going back, we put on yellow stars. And there we were leaving Ponar and going back to Vilnius. When somewhere about a kilometer or two away, suddenly from the bushes there appeared police cars with sirens which surrounded our entire group. They took the camera with which we had photographed what happened there. They simply confiscated it. And for that reason, nothing remains of what happened at Ponar." Asked to characterize how he sees Ponar and why it was important to hold a meeting there, Ben Tzvi said, Although it wasn't written under the Soviet government that 70,000 Jews had been murdered there, but it was written 70,000 Soviet citizens were murdered there, the more they persecuted us, the more we resisted and come together to form a single common. So that location became a symbol for us. Nonetheless, as many Jews left in Lithuania in 70s, trips to Ponar didn't grind a halt. Milan Khersonsky recalls in 1979 when he became a director of the People's Jewish Theater and the Palace of Professional Unions, where the theater was located, had a bus, so that on 9th of May 1880, Victory Day, the theater collective was able to drive to Ponar. The trip was repeated a year later, during which the partisan Chaim Zeindelson met with the group there and told of Jewish life and death. Since then, visits to mass murder sites took place annually, up until the time when the most of the collective had left Lithuania for Israel, approximately in 1988 and 1990s. An upsurge in commemoration began at the same time as the Lithuanian independence movement Sąjūdis got underway, when two important Jewish organizations formed. Tkuma and the Lithuanian Cultural Foundation's Jewish Cultural Association, which later became the Lithuanian Jewish Community, and which had a separate commission for looking after Jewish cemeteries and mass murder sites. These two organizations, while engaged in slight competition, took the initiative in maintaining mass murder sites, including Ponar. Both organizations were putting great efforts in the physical maintenance of the sites. While the association continued to do commemoration in May, following the tradition of commemorating Holocaust victims together with the victory of the motherland against fascism in the Great Patriotic War, Tkuma chose a different day to commemorate, organizing their March of the Living in the autumn, in remembrance of the liquidation of Vilnius ghetto. At one of the first Tkuma meetings, a march to Ponar was held in 1988, with a Star of David carried by the marchers and placed at the edge of the pits. Another initiative of the Tkuma organizations was the planting of oak saplings at Ponar. This is how one family leaving for Israel characterized this initiative in thank you letter to Tkuma. Family members were preparing to leave, but felt some sort of feeling of dissatisfaction. And then, all of a sudden, we read in Etzleinu about planting a small oak tree in remembrance. And then we realized what the feeling of dissatisfaction was all about. After all, until then, we had done everything for ourselves. We studied the language, we prepared, we bought things for the trip. But to plant a tree, that means to leave something behind after you're gone. To plant a small oak at Ponar, where our departed brothers and sisters rest, that means to be together invisibly whenever we might be. So, when we consider the cases presented above, we see that visits by Jews to Ponar took place the entire time from before the actual end of the war, despite discouragement and obstacles created by the regime in power. As time changed, personal and institutionalized, organized visits became differentiated. They later took on various different forms. From the wish by the original visitors to say and sing prayers and learn about the fate of relatives, to later visits during which the site became a symbol in the struggle for the right to exit the Soviet Union, to the current form acquired during the Zionist era of remembering, of being there whenever elsewhere one might actually be in reality. Thank you.
Thank you for your interesting presentation and for keeping to our schedule. And questions, вопросы, если есть вопросы.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.